All right. So super nice to meet you. Glad that you came on today. Tell us how you got started in all of this because it seems like you cover some really uncomfortable topics, and that must mean that you have a big story behind them.
I do. I do. I don't really know where to start. My life has kind of been a series of unfortunate or fortunate events. Can't really decide. But I guess the where how I got to where I am right now is I released a book last April, but the book is about my first husband um, and my daughter Tatum. About Gosh, I hate to even say it was that long ago, 15 years ago. I had four children and I married my best friend. We grew up in grammar school. It was my first kiss. And he came home from the doctor's, or he went into the emergency room and they diagnosed him with pancreatic cancer. So at that time, it was kind of like they said, take him home. He has 2 weeks to live and,
Oh my,
let him say goodbye. Yeah.
how
But
devastating.
yeah, it was. It was unreal. He didn't. Luckily, he ended up living 16 months because, his mother was the oldest at that point, the oldest surviving ovarian cancer patient in the United States. So
Wow.
we kind of felt like he could beat it too. She
Um,
actually got like 30 years extra after diagnosis. So
wow.
she was, yeah, so she was kind of the miracle patient. Unfortunately, he was not as lucky as her. But right before he was diagnosed, we had a daughter, I have a daughter. She's now 24, but she was born with primordial dwarfism.
Okay.
So, for people who don't know what that is, she's a little person, but she's completely proportionate. So right now she's less than 4 feet and she weighs 24 pounds. So it's not that rare. I mean, it is, but when she was born, it was like pre-internet. So there was no way we had to travel with her and try and figure out what was wrong with her. Why she was so small because she just stopped growing. Like when she was one, she was like literally 8 pounds, and running around with 0 to 3 month shoes and
But running
um,
around.
running around. Yeah,
And you
I
didn't
mean,
know at
it's
that
so
point?
funny.
You didn't know?
No, we did. Well, we didn't know what it was. When I first got pregnant with her, I had lost a couple babies beforehand. We had an older son. And I would just go to when I went to the ultrasound, they would say, like, oh, congratulations, she's 6 weeks. And I was like, great. And then every time I would go, congratulations, she's measuring 6 weeks, like up to almost 12 weeks. And at first we could kind of brush it off as just being measurement error because they're so tiny.
Mhm.
But, as time went on, it was kind of like, no, that would mean that I was pregnant, the whole thing, the math didn't work. So
Mhm.
from then on, it was, one thing after another. There was some blood markers that said that she was going to have trisomy 18, which is the third 18th chromosome, which you can live with, but there's no life quality. You probably live about 5 years outside and there's just nothing. So it went from that to, she's going to come out and not be able to breathe. Um, I think I had in total 42 different, ultrasounds, but, they could never tell me or show me that anything was wrong. Everything was theoretical. Everything was, well, she's just small, but she was perfect in every way. And I just could never make that determination. They would say, like, oh, she's not going to do well, she's not going to live. But in my heart, I was kind of like, unless you can show me proof, I'm
Mhm.
I'm sticking it out. So when she came along, we did go to um, well, so when she was born, they used the wrong size intubation tube and they messed up her throat, which led to a series of, 3 months in the NICU and just all these cascading things.
How much did she weigh
So
when she was born?
she was 3 pounds when she was born.
Wow.
She was, yeah, 37 weeks, and they really thought that she was going to be about 6 pounds. So they had me delivering at a regular hospital. And when she came out, they just weren't equipped. So
Mhm.
they did what they could. But from that point on, like I said, there was just so much done at birth that she kind of missed oxygen, and we ended up in a NICU for 3 months. And people just kept coming in, and they test her genetics. They did, and they just kept saying like she looks funny. And as a mom, you're like you do know you're telling me my daughter looks funny. Like I get it. You think that's like a medical diagnosis, but really you're just insulting me
I mean, it's kind of
because
insulting. The all of the theoretical stuff that they had during your pregnancy is pretty insulting. You should never, because there's a everybody's pretty well familiar with the placebo effect. Well, there's a
Mhm.
nocebo effect also, where if
Yeah,
you're looking for problems or assuming there will be problems, then you're causing more problems than we need to cause. So, very unprofessional.
absolutely.
I mean, they should have just kept to, we don't know, we're still researching.
Right. And it was something new every day. It was like they would just throw these things out there. And with my first son, I didn't gain a whole bunch of weight, but by the time I had Tatum, I had lost 13 pounds throughout the pregnancy. So
Wow.
there was always that question, like, until we found out, that she did have this primordial dwarfism, there was always a question in the back of my head, like, is she small because I didn't eat and I was throwing up and I had all this stress on me?
Right.
Or is she small, for some other reason? And when they damaged her throat, they were so like hell bent on finding out what the global thing was. And in my head, I was like, can we just focus on what we're seeing right now? Like, not that there's nothing there, but everyone was so they just wanted to know what's wrong with her. And I was kind of like, well, what's wrong with her right now is that she can't breathe. So let's fix that. What's wrong with her then is she can't eat. So, and that's kind of been a prevalent theme with her entire life is that everybody cares so greatly about what's going on, the global picture of it, that they seem to negate that, like, she's a human being. We're
Mhm.
dealing in the here and now. Um, and, to her credit, she has exceeded everyone's everything. They said she wouldn't walk, she wouldn't talk. They would come over and they'd say, "Oh, well, can she make it up the stairs?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I don't know." And, sure enough, she'd be up those stairs. Like she never missed a milestone. She's still just completely tenacious. Like I said, she's 24 now. She's 24 pounds. She also, after her father passed away, we moved to Charlotte. And when we got there at the age of 13, she was diagnosed with a rare connective form of connective tissue cancer,
Oh,
which had nothing to do with anything prior to that. Um, so the only thing they could do was to remove that. So they had to remove, tissue, bone, and then graft her legs. So she has just been, there's no reason why she's here. And she just keeps plugging along, and she's taught herself art. She sells her art online, and she just wants to be a part of the world. Like that's all she cares about. So she
yeah.
was kind of the driving force behind me publishing the book about her and her dad, just because she just like makes everybody happy, just seeing her and seeing her resilience and her tenacity. And she's just a little force. She's a mighty little force, but she's a little force. So
Well, good. Yeah, I can
yeah.
imagine that that was insanely powerful experiences to have over and over and over again, like especially I lost my first, and so I understand going into the next pregnancy just already an anxious wreck. And then
Yes.
and then now you're finding out things are not going the way we want them to go, and oh, we don't have any answers. Oh, now we're just throwing noodles at the wall. You don't even that's
Yeah.
it's experiencing, well, people go one of two ways, I suppose. They throw up walls and just block it all out and disassociate and pretend nothing's happening,
Yeah.
which is what I think most people do most of the time with mortality. because it's scary. It's super scary. And especially when I feel like people can oftentimes accept their own mortality a little bit easier than the mortality of those that they love. So
Yeah.
you're experiencing that loss over and over and over and over again, and it hasn't even occurred yet.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said of like, especially when my husband was passing away, we were one person,
Yeah,
we had grown up together. And so, you know, I didn't know who I was without him. And the thought
sure,
of losing him, I was losing me too. And when he passed away, that person I was, it died with him.
sure.
And when you say putting up blocks and borders, and that's why this book has sat on my laptop for 12 years. I decided when he passed away that I was just going to put all of his belongings into a neat little plastic crate and I would just move along. And I made a series of a lot of, you know, I wouldn't say dumb, but a series of a lot of decisions based on trying to avoid
Hmm.
reliving it, trying to avoid just feeling it, the grief of it. So yeah, I
Sure.
think that we either go into the storm head on or we dance around it long enough. But it always comes back in one
Yeah.
way or another.
Yeah,
So
that's the thing is that the longer you put it off, the longer it's going to stick around because you have to go through it in order to process it and get to the other end. But I imagine, how old were your children when he passed?
so my oldest was 12 and my youngest was she was about 2.
Mm,
So yeah, it was so the special needs, so uh, the oldest and then the special needs and then I had 2 more after that. Yeah, and I do get a lot from people asking like, well, after Tatum, why would you continue? Why would you have more children, And I often look back and think if I didn't, our lives would have been so immersed in sickness and sadness and isolation. And, because Tatum couldn't that's her name, she couldn't be around other people because she would get sick. She hasn't been able to go to school because she would be sick. And gosh, I can't even imagine how lonely her life would have been. She has all these brothers and sisters and chaos around our house. And to other people looking in, I think sometimes they're like, you're always putting more on your plate and kind of like I'm in denial about it, or, I just keep roll bouncing. And I think that roll bounce is where you learn to live with it and you don't let it stop you and you learn to see the beauty in it, and you don't get stuck in it. So
yeah.
there's something to be said for that too.
Well, there's this whole theory that the reason we're so anxious and depressed and stressed out these days, well, maybe not stressed out, but anxious and depressed, is because we don't have enough responsibilities. Because if you
I
have
could see
enough
that.
responsibilities, you don't have time to be anxious and depressed because you're just
Eh,
like, go, 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 go. We got to get to the next thing. We got to, and especially as a mother, and you have these lives that you have to care for because children can't care for themselves. And, or, some will try, but you, you didn't have time, I imagine, to mourn.
no, no. And here I in my first book I talk a lot about just like dancing and saying you're fine, like I'm fine, I'm fine. um there is a powerful tool behind it because it does get you somewhere, but at some point you have to recognize that it's hurting rather than helping. And I think I pushed that line a little bit too much necessarily. But yeah, I couldn't wake up in the morning. Everyone said, I don't know how you did it. And I was like, how do you not do it? Like, yeah, I didn't really have a choice.
Yeah,
And, now that my children are getting older, I do find myself like, oh my gosh, all of the laundry's done. Like, what am I going to do with my day? And it is a
right.
very weird, and I'm glad I didn't have all that time because I literally would have been like going insane, that there is a lot of time to sit and reflect and you need that time, but too much of that time is probably not good. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, there's affirmations and positivity, it's a delicate balance because you for sure want to. I talk a lot about mindset work, and if you're down and out all the time, the first step is realizing that you are like, okay, I'm realizing that my mental chatter is on the negative end, the unhelpful end of things. So, can we switch over to something more positive? Can we put our focus on, oh, okay, like the sunshine today? That's nice. Let me go see if I can get some of that on my face. Or, something as simple as, man, these walls really look nice. I did a good job painting these 10 years ago. Still kind of like the color. Yeah, this is a good color. Just it doesn't matter what it is, but there's also avoidance that you want to avoid. So like
Right.
positivity is great, but there's toxic positivity which avoids the emotions and the processing of them, and that does a lot more harm in the long run. And also as parents, we find ourselves wanting to disguise our emotions in front of our children, be strong for them. And that
Yeah.
also is a delicate balance because, like, yes, you should model strength for them and show them how to do that and be that and stuff, but not in such a way that we're callous or not introduce. I think we probably do a lot of harm in the long run by hiding our emotions from our children because, I mean, emotional regulation is a brand new topic for most people. Nobody
Yeah.
really knew what emotional regulation was even 10 years ago. Uh, so, if we suppress all of these emotions and we don't let our children see us cry, then they grow up and then they're confronted with these, their own emotions of loss and grief in all of its forms. Being human is horribly painful emotionally.
Yeah.
And many of us who have experienced emotional pain and physical pain would take the physical pain 100 times
Oh,
over.
100%. Yes. Yes, I would agree with that.
Right. And then they don't know what to do with it. So, you know, were y'all able to come together as a family and support each other, or did we just shut it off and all right, moving on now?
Right. Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about I think one of my biggest character flaws is I used to see it as a positive is that I'm so independent. I will not ask. I could be losing a limb and I'd be like, no, no, I'm fine. Trying to tape it back on and not letting anybody help me. And I think it's obviously served me well. Otherwise, I don't know that I would be sitting here with you. But in the same respect, I see my children, their life is harder because when they model my behavior and they don't accept help and they don't tell people when they need help, like my youngest will be like, so and so didn't care about. And I said, well, did you tell them how you felt? And she's like, no, but they just should have known. And I was like, well, how would they know? You're acting like everything's fine, but you're expecting them to know that it's not fine. And, I think a lot of that they get from me because I'm always fine. Everything's fine. So yeah, I think a little bit, if I could just learn to be a little less dependent or independent, I think everyone would probably be a lot better off for it. But again, it serves you at a certain point in your life. It's hard to switch gears when it doesn't and recognize that it's no longer working for you and you have to try something else. So
Yeah, we're supposed to be communal creatures or whatever, but and most of us forget that, especially in our society and culture where we've been conditioned to be independent and sectioned off. And that's another problem with people's anxiety and stress
yeah,
levels and overwhelm and loneliness, depression, is that we've lost that sense of community and village. And it's really hard to get it back once you don't have it. And there's so, so, so many people who have never experienced it at all, and they don't know where to go to even begin building it because, and now we're getting on a completely different subject. Um, which we
yes,
could
but
totally go
no.
down the rabbit hole if you wanted to with that. I love talking
Yeah,
about this. Um, but grief is one of those things that really snaps you back to reality of the importance of village and
yeah.
one another. And I'm glad that you had your children because many of us find our own village when we become parents and we create our own little village out of our, offspring, and we just immerse ourselves in our little family, which is a beautiful thing in a thousand different ways, but can also be a very hard thing, very challenging thing because we were supposed to, I always tell people that parenting is not even a two-person job.
Right.
If you have two wonderful partners that, hit all the responsibilities and put all the priorities up front and do all of the right things, even those two people are going to struggle tremendously, especially in the newborn stages. But
Oh
uh,
yeah.
throughout the whole, like it takes a village is a cliche because it takes a village. But
It does.
being able to focus on your children really helps you a lot with a lot of things. And I think our children are wonderful introspective tools into our own behavior because many times we don't realize that we have that pattern until we recognize it in our child. And we're like, oh, I've seen that before in the mirror.
Yeah. If 100%. Yeah, they'll always they'll make you honest. You know,
And
in a
humble
good way.
you.
Yes, definitely humble you. I say that the worst phrase that ever comes out my mouth is my child would never. The minute you say that, I'm getting a call from the principal. I'm getting, um, yeah, the children, I honestly, everyone, when they say, well, I don't know how you were, juggling all these kids. I don't know how I would have made it through if I wasn't.
Right.
And that's kind of, after my first husband passed away, and my second book is coming out, couple more months, but my second book is a continuation of that, and that's a different type of situation I got into with a really bad relationship. And again, like I said, bad decisions, but I had two additional children from that relationship. So again, everyone was like, "Why are you starting over again?" And I thank God every day that I had those two because it was kind of the same situation where they pulled me out of, you know, a situation where I could have just self-destructed, but I couldn't, So
Yeah.
yeah,
So we had a really hard, so we're up to six now, right? Six children?
I am up to six. Yes,
Okay.
yes, I'm
Was there
done.
more?
That's it. That's it. I
Okay.
promise. Four dogs, but yeah,
Those are children.
they are.
They
Yes,
are.
yes. Mine. I have a husky, so it's like 10 children.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. My in-laws always had huskies and Akitas, which Akitas are like huskies, but more feral.
Yeah. Oh
And
gosh.
those are
I don't
just
know how they.
the independent dogs. If you want a low maintenance dog, that is not the direction you want to go. And
No.
they're also escape artists. You cannot
You
keep
have
them contained.
you
Cannot.
have no idea. I mean,
No
I was
control. I do. I
they
do have.
told the police said I was going to get 1,000. They were like, "You're going to get a big ticket," and I was like, "You could give me $1 million ticket, and there's nothing more I could do." Like there was chicken wire everywhere, and so now he just can't ever leave my side. I love him. He's the greatest dog, and I get so sad, but like he will get out of choke collars. He will.
Uh,
I mean, scale 10-foot walls. Yeah. So.
yeah. I always thought I wanted a husky until I me and my husband have been together since we were 16. So, and I started hanging out with his family and they had huskies and I was like, "Oh, you know what? I think I'm a little bit too lazy for a husky. I don't
Yeah.
they're beautiful dogs, but we landed on we have Great Pyrenees mixes. So we have
Oh, I have one of those too. Yeah, I
okay.
love my Great Pyrenees. It's a Bernese Mountain Dog
Oh
Great
my
Pyrenees
goodness.
mix. Yeah, I know. He's so
Uh
cute. His name is Humphrey.
I have a friend who has a purebred Bernie's what her name is, and she is
Yeah.
enormous. I love big dogs. And
Yeah.
the thing with big dogs though that people don't understand is that big dogs know that they're alpha-ish.
Yeah.
So they can be kind of jerks, and if they don't feel like listening, they're not going to listen. And huskies kind of fall into that category too, but
Yeah.
uh, our Pyreneeses are a little bit. We have a Pyrenees lab mix. He's solid
Oh,
white. and not near as big as we thought he was going to be. But then
That's
we
nice.
also have a Pyrenees Shepherd of some sort. He was just a little mutt dog that showed up at my mother-in-law's house that I, as a puppy, and that I brought home. And he's only a year old, so he's still growing, and he's already nearly twice the size of my other one,
Oh,
who's
wow.
3 or 4. Okay, dogs. Love dogs.
Yeah,
Anyway,
dogs.
circling full circle back around. Um, we had a really rough year in 2021. My grandfather had a strange sort of trauma-induced dementia. And since it wasn't traditional dementia, it progressed really strangely. And so he was slowly dying for 10, 12 years. And so in 2021, he died. A month later, my father-in-law died of COVID. And so that was the year that I really got to sit back and see how everybody processed grief.
Mhm.
And it's such a powerful subject, and our culture and society hides from it. Nobody wants to talk about death. Nobody knows how to talk about death. When someone loses someone, they kind of like pat you on the back and say, I'm here if you need anything. But other than that, they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. And that makes it really hard. It makes it a lot harder on the person experiencing the grief because we've hid death behind closed doors for so long that when it inevitably arises for every single one of us, the paths that people take to navigate that can be oftentimes just as extreme as the feelings and emotions that they're experiencing. So we had I'll try not to name names just in case anybody's like, but we had one person who went absolutely off the deep end and got arrested like 3 times, totaled in the matter of a month and a half, okay? Totaled
Right,
2 vehicles, had to be med flighted on the second one. It was just crazy. And then we had another person who so that was with my father-in-law's side of it. And then with my grandfather's side, we had people who were his direct caretakers for, he again, we knew he was dying. He was
goodness.
slowly dying for 10 or 15 years. And it was, like I say, slowly, it was very dramatic. It caused seizures. So every time he had a seizure, he would fall and like break some ribs or hit his head. And he was med flighted probably 3 or 4 times during all of this. So we were once every 3 months at least getting a phone call that, oh, we're headed to the hospital with Papa again. He had a seizure. He's being med flighted. We don't know. So like every time they called, we were like, is this it? Are we finally here?
Right.
But
But you aren't.
nevertheless, even after all of that preparation, when he did finally die, and I don't like the word finally, but inevitably, when we did get there, painstakingly slow. We had people who were his direct caregivers for all of these years that were shocked,
Yeah.
and they had not processed actually losing him a single bit before they actually were faced with it. And the problem with avoiding processing these emotions is that uh, the emotions are going to cause problems in your life and in your other relationships. And you miss out on, because we're all going to get there. And under the best of circumstances, life is not long enough. We could live to be 120 and still have all our vitality, and it would still not be long enough. It's just kind of cruel, but
Yeah.
also super humbling. And if we can just learn how to face it a little bit easier, a little bit quicker, come together and help each other facing it. And that's I think that's a big thing that we're missing is that a lot of people feel like they have to process it by themselves.
Hmm.
and they don't have that support because the emotions are too big for one person. And that's why we need to figure out how to support one another and help each other through so that we can be liberated from the emotions and the fear of mortality so that we can learn how to be happy and enjoy the moment that we're in today and that we still have. Or else we're squandering what time we do have by living in the past or wishing things were different or this and that. They say that some of the happiest people on earth are the ones who have always lived in war-torn nations because every day is just a party, because every day could be your last
Still
day.
there. Yeah.
And they've all experienced um, they've all experienced death and loss, and it's almost a regular thing for them. So every day they're just, yeah, celebrating the fact that they are still there and that their kids are still here today and their parents are still here today. And if we can just take it day by day, one by one, then yeah.
Yeah. I think I experienced a lot of that. I would say Tatum was dying, every 2 months. We were resuscitating her, or she was, having surgery. And then that bounced right from all of her. It was almost like when she started taking flight, Colin was dying. And you do, I think you just, you were talking about how you have to do it alone. What my experience was, is that I wanted to face it. And when I would say things like, I don't know how much longer he's going to be around, everyone around me would say, like, oh, he's going to beat it. He's fine, and
Yep.
they would come and they would visit and they'd be like, Colin looks great. And I'm like, who are you? He weighs 70 pounds. And because I was immersed in it, I was accepting it, I
Hmm.
was seeing the inevitability of it. It made me feel really bad about me because I was like, first of all, why am I being so negative? Like maybe he will make it, which I know he wasn't, but everybody wanted me to put this like, it's going to be great. And I began to see a disservice to him because he was around for 16 months, but they were not rosy months, as like you said with your watching your father-in-law. um it just came to a point where everyone would come over and he wanted to continue with chemo, and he's 37 years old, 36, not even 35. And how do you tell someone no? But at the same time, it was the end of the road, and him doing chemo was just making it worse. But everyone was still doing the, we got this, we're gonna beat it. And I had a lot of survivor guilt. That's what I attribute it to afterward, because here I was lying to him about chemo and saying, oh, we're gonna do it, knowing full well we weren't. And I would tell people like, he looks horrible, and they would be like, almost look at me like, why are you being so negative? And I wasn't being negative, I was accepting that these moments aren't going to last forever, and the good fight is not a good fight. It's a worthless fight when we should all be coming together and discussing things and saying our goodbyes rather than avoiding, not talking to him, not coming by. And that was very hard for me to be in that position where I always felt like I was, lying to him, being negative with other people. And how could I want him to be gone? Like, that was something that I really struggled with, and nobody else really had to sit and watch it, or very few people did. Um, but that whole feeling of, God, please take him, or whoever's out there, it makes you feel bad, and it shouldn't, because you don't want to see the people you love suffer. And I remember saying it out loud, and it just was like, I can't believe I just said I wish she was gone. So those kind of things do, in our culture, people, they kind of push you away, and when they ask how you're doing, they want to hear fine. And if you don't say fine, then it's very uncomfortable. Like, you don't say, like, when someone says, how are things? You're not like, oh, the mortgage was coming apart. Colin's been throwing up for 4 days. Tatum's sick. That is too heavy for them. And it's almost like they stand back like, oh, I was expecting fine. And
Mm-hmm.
then you're like, well, I don't really want to talk about it anyway. So there's this push and there's a pull, and all of a sudden the phone stops ringing. And it's a very isolating feeling at a time when you really need people in your life. It's very hard. So I I agree with you that our culture does not like to look at death. They don't, the inevitability of it, it makes other people feel vulnerable and scared and unpredictable, and nobody likes to feel that way. So, unfortunately, people that are caregiving, you're kind of stuck in it. And I
Mm-hmm.
will say another thing to your credit is that, I think no matter if someone is 110 years old, those when they go, you're still shocked. It's like you get a call and they're like, "Oh, great grandma, you know, Barth passed away," and you're like, "Oh," even though she might have had Alzheimer's for 10 years and you probably didn't visit for
130.
another 10 years. Yeah. You're still like, "Really?"
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That's super common though. It the caregivers wishing they want the nightmare to end, and you can't fault them for wanting the nightmare to end and for their next, because especially when it's really long and drawn out and you're like, because I think many of us sit around and daydream about what life is going to be like afterwards. And then, but we're still stuck in the nightmare, and we just want the nightmare to end so that we can just go ahead and get to the next step because everybody's suffering. And
yeah,
also to your point, yes, that is people. I did an episode similar to this with a it's not a church, sorry, it's not a hospital reverend, but I always forget, but what her title.
chaplain, maybe.
Yes, yes, thank you. And
Yes.
so that's what she mainly deals with also is grief. And our episode went very similarly to this one. And we were talking about how you can be on your deathbed, you have hours left, and people will still walk in there and be like, "Hey, we're gonna go grab some beers after this, aren't we? Some tacos? Let's go have a picnic. Let's go have a picnic." And but a really good like priest per se, and it doesn't even have to be someone religious, it can be just anybody, it can be your Uncle Joe, can walk in there and be real with you about the situation, and it helps,
It
not
does.
the oh, you're fine, we're gonna get out of here and we're gonna go have some beers and some tacos is not helpful to someone who knows that's not going to happen. You're doing that for you. You're trying to make you feel better by being like that. But somebody who's really well versed in these situations and familiar with them can speak to you and actually make you feel pretty like better about it. If you're real and you go in there and you're like, "Man, I'm jealous. You're fixing to get out of this shithole." You know,
Yeah.
you're not going to have to pay taxes anymore. Just
Right.
kind of treat them
Be
like a human
honest. Yeah.
being. You know,
Yeah. And that was the thing, is like he's clearly, he was hallucinating, but he had enough of him left where he wanted to talk about it.
hmm
If I felt alone, I can't even imagine how alone he felt, because he probably had things he wanted to say. He probably had questions, like I remember him one time long before he got to that stage, but we're sitting and having lunch and he said to me, "So when you have cancer, like, what do you die of?" And it was very profound to me because I was like, I don't know. And I said, I guess like your body just gets to a point where the cancer takes over and it just can't function. And I suppose it would be like dehydration. And just like even thinking about it, I know how much courage it took for him to like ask me that and have that conversation. But he was so scared. And I know that, you know, he needed somebody in there with him,
hmm
being in that position. And everyone else was trying to be like, well, who cares? That's never going to happen. And we're not going to talk about this because that's uncomfortable. And I think to somebody who's dying, that has got like, again, the position I was in was very isolating, but I also knew that there was like something beyond after he was gone. And for him not to be able to just sit down and have that conversation, say to someone, I'm really scared, like these are, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Um, the fact that I don't know that he ever felt comfortable enough, we would have little whispers about it, and I would say, go set up camp and I'll meet you there. Um, but that constant, like, he would say something and people would dismiss it because it was uncomfortable for them. And that made me upset, and I couldn't stop it. And then when I would try and get in the middle of it, it just got more awkward. So
Mhm.
I just kept silent too. And I think that guard of silence has got to be very tough for the person who's, dealing with the gravity of it outside of the people that are watching them deal with the gravity of it. So,
Well, as our chaplain episode lady was telling us, they teach you in chaplain school that there is absolutely nothing that you can say to make things easier or better. But there are a million and 10 things that you can say to make things worse. So active listening and just being around. And that's the thing that people, they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. So they just avoid and deflect and make jokes and which I'm all about making some jokes. Let's make some jokes, but not in a deflective way.
right.
Let's make some jokes in some real way because um and that's not me not taking it seriously. That's me like if we don't figure out a way to laugh about this, we're all going to fall apart and cry.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
try to find a little bit of humor when you can, and laughing heals. So, maybe make it a little bit better. But for sure, active listening, you don't have to say anything. You just have to be present. You just have to bear witness to their suffering, bear witness to their thoughts and their ideas and their words and their life, and just be there for them. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
You just gotta
Yeah.
show up. You just gotta show up. And
And sit there and just keep your mouth shut.
that's
Like,
it.
like,
That's it. People
yeah,
talk way too much as we
well,
talk
and
the podcast.
right. And I think too, when things become uncomfortable, everybody, I wrote a book about like everybody has these phrases that,
Yep.
they never really sit and think about. Like when someone says, well, God
He's
only
living
gives
this
you what you
thing.
can handle, or everything happens for a reason. Sure, I'm sure that there is a lot of validity to all of those sayings, but when you're really going through a struggle and somebody says that,
You want to punch
it
them.
ki- yeah, it's like you're minimizing, I don't need a cliche right now. And just because God only gives me what I can handle, I don't feel like handling it right now. So I don't need you telling me that whatever it is. But, people just throw these things out like, okay, are we good now? I said it.
Yep.
So,
Can I
or
go?
what can I do to help? Well, when you see someone like struggling and you know, when people would ask me, what can I do to help? It was so nice. But at the same time, I
I
was
don't know.
like, I don't even know. But
Hmm.
yet, I'm sure if I walk into someone's house when they're going through this, just walk into their laundry room and fold their clothes or, bring a meal, pick their kids up from school.
Hmm.
You don't necessarily I think there's this like I don't want to bug them.
Yeah.
And I think that that's obviously a respect thing and I appreciate that. But I think sometimes that respect thing puts hurdles in people's way that they just don't like step up and say,
Hmm.
to somebody if someone had taken something off my plate, like I remember I woke up one morning and I was in Chicago. I lived in Chicago, and somebody had taken their snowblower over to my house and had just like cleared my driveway. Like I didn't expect it. I don't even know who it was. Like they just showed up, did it, didn't ask for credit for it, wasn't saying like, oh, I did this for you so that I felt obligated or like indebted. And it's those kind of acts of service that are so kind. And if you don't know what to say to somebody, if you are not, because not everyone's good sitting with you, not everyone
Sure.
can handle that emotionally, but then find out how you can do things to make things easier for somebody if you want to. instead of throwing out a phrase that clearly,
Hmm.
everyone, I believe that everyone has the best of intentions, and people showed up for me in ways that I can never repay. And that's the other thing is my daughter and I started a charity. So it's in Colin's name. It's called the Colin James Barth Outreach. And it's for people in these situations trying to navigate and do the things that mean the most, but you don't know what those are, rather than, writing a check to someone, which is nice too, don't get me wrong. But just showing up, doing things, taking away that, like, oh, I don't want to bother them, or worrying if you do catch somebody, then you're going to get caught sitting down and talking with them if you're if you're not somebody who's comfortable with that, and that's okay. Not everybody can sit down and have those conversations, and that's fine. Like we all have our strengths and weaknesses and talents, and um, just finding the way to help people in those situations is tough, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. They said that asking, telling them if you need anything, let me know, puts more on them because now because they're in their head and they're like, I do need help, but I don't know how. I don't know what to tell you to do. I don't want to tell you to do my laundry because that just seems weird. And I don't want to tell you to do
Yeah.
my dishes because that just seems weird. And so a better alternative to if you need anything, let me know is, hey, I can do X, Y, or Z at this time slot. Which
Yeah.
one would you prefer for me to do? And if you
Yeah.
if you present it like that, most people, a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, you don't have to," just because that, again, that's the culture. Um, but if you just insist, like, "No, I'm doing one of those three things
Right. So
this
choose.
time slot. Which one do you want to do?" And again, if they're like, "I don't know," like, "Okay, well, I'm doing this one then," or
Right.
"I'm doing that one."
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, again, I think people have the best intentions. And when somebody says, I don't, I don't know, they don't want to probe, they don't want to press, and they can see that it's causing somebody stress to even like ask them because you're so
Hmm.
overwhelmed. You're like, I don't know.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that's, I've been kind of advocating for that as well. Like, just show up, just do something. If you see something that they're struggling with, you know, a lot of people just did things, and they weren't like my, closest friends. They were people just in the community who dropped things off or just saw a need, or,
Funny how that
said,
usually
I'm
happens,
picking.
isn't it?
It is. And, illness can bring out the best in people and it can bring out the worst in people. But I think everybody has good intentions in it. And I think even when it brings out the worst in you, I think it's fear. I think it's, I just think, I don't think anyone purposely, everybody wants to help. They just don't know how.
Yeah. I mean, even getting away from the subject of grief, when you encounter people who are mean, angry, bullies, the way I explain it to my children who go to public school, they'll be like, such and such is so mean. I'm like, look, kids who are loved at home, and this translates to adults as well. If kids who are loved at home come to school and have more love to give because they're overfull with love. They have all the love they need and it's spilling out and they can be nice and they can be kind and they can share and they can think about your feelings instead of just themselves. But kids who don't get that love and their love meter is empty, they don't have any to give and they don't know how to give. So they lash out in anger because it's just emotions. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody needs to be loved. That's a need that a lot of people don't consider, especially in like the old mentality of parenting. Your kid needs food, water, shelter, and clothing. Love is not a
Yeah.
necessity.
No, no.
It's not something you need
And they need a job, let's be honest about that. No, I'm kidding.
these days, for
That's
sure.
the way I was brought up. Yeah. She needs something to do. Um, but yeah, I think you're right. And that phrase, I heard it probably 2 years ago, and I'm sure it's been around, but hurt people to
Hmm.
me it's spot on. I mean, if somebody is unwarrantedly mean to you or, have a problem with you, that doesn't have anything to do with you
Kill them
usually.
with
It's
kindness. Ask them if they're okay.
yeah.
Just like if someone insults you, just be like, "Are you okay? Are you having a bad day?
Right.
What's the matter? Do you want to talk about it? Do you need a hug?" I'm
Do
a
you need a
hugger.
hug? Yeah.
And honestly, it's gonna go one of two ways. Well, maybe three ways. They're gonna be like, you know what? I do. It has been a bad day. And their tone of demeanor is gonna change, or they're gonna continue lashing out of defense mechanism. If they continue
Yeah.
lashing out, it's a defense mechanism. And then you're like, oh, who hurt you? I promise
Yeah.
I'm not going to hurt you. I mean, if you need some space, I'll give you some space. But most of
Yeah.
the time, people are just going to be so flabbergasted that you called them out at all in a positive manner instead of just giving it right back to them because that's not what they're used to. That's not our innate response generally. If someone lashes out to you, your response is usually to lash right back. And
Or yeah, or walk away or yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, anybody who's acting like that just needs more love. They probably don't have
I agree.
anybody back home or in their life or you'd be amazed. Most people don't realize the amount of people who are walking around here solo and they have no family and uh, they probably have more acquaintances than they do actual friends. There's this lady that I know who, uh, around the holidays, we were talking about the holiday. She comes to a class that I do, and she was like, eh. And I was like, you don't like the holidays? And she was like, I mean, it's just another day for me. And then like I was probing. I was just and not like I was just talking to her and kind of found out the only person she has in the world is her sister who lives 2 hours away. So
Yeah.
she's just free floating through life. And I've met several people throughout my life who are just they don't have anyone to turn to and they don't know how to turn to anybody. And another problem with our culture is a us versus them mentality and outsiders or well that's not just a culture thing that's kind of like programmed in our head as a human thing of having your village your circle and anybody that is an outlier of your village and circle you're kind of skeptical of and side eye and
It
don't
threatens the
trust.
group. Yeah,
Yeah.
it threatens the group or the balance of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so people are like, oh, you do that for family, but you don't do that for other people. And like, well, I have a lot of problems with that because the whole oh, they're family mentality. Well, sometimes family don't really deserve, you know?
Right.
And
Yes, I do
sometimes this
know. I do.
outlier is the nicest, sweetest, most deserving person you've ever met in your life, and they really are heart of gold, golden,
Yeah.
and so we're supposed to kick them to the curb just because they're not one of us, you know.
Yeah.
But oh, Uncle Bob over here, who we
Yeah.
all know is abusive, and we all know is just walking red flag after red flag. Oh, he still gets invited to Thanksgiving, but we can't invite Sally over here, who has never done wrong to anybody that we've ever seen.
Right. Yeah, I think we're much more accepting of the people in our lives who we feel an obligation to. That's one of my biggest like questions about humanity is like, why do some people act badly and hurt other people and everyone's like, oh, that's just so and so. But then the kindest person in the world could be having a horrible day and do something not nice and everybody is all over them like well I can't believe but this person standing next to him has been breaking hearts like since the 1990s but we build expectations for people and when sometimes we set bars way too low and we accept things from people when we really shouldn't and we and the other respect, we set bars for other people way too high,
Mhm.
and they can't go one way or the other with it without everyone being very upset about, well, you're supposed to be this person. And
Mhm.
we all have our, nobody's perfect, but sometimes we expect perfection from some, and we never ask for good things from others. So,
I agree. It's that thing where we're a victim of our own success. Like in a job place, you do really good at your job and you do all the things you're supposed to do, so they give you more responsibilities
Right.
to do. It's the same thing because you're absolutely right. The person who is, for the most part, pretty mild-mannered, pretty even keel, they are not allowed to have a bad day. They are not allowed to have a reaction. They are not allowed to have any emotions that are not pleasant, or else everyone's attacking them. And
Mhm.
that's so damaging. That's so um what's the word? There's a word. It's a really simple word. Um yeah.
Yeah. It is, especially for people who are pleasers and you just and you're going through a hard time, like I
Betrayal.
just
It's
there
betraying.
you
There
go.
you go.
It is for training.
Simple word.
I just well, that was a good one. Good job. I just think that when you're going through a hard time, and I think that was another thing with Colin is that like I really care what people think of me. I mean, I was born that way. I don't you can say maybe I'm a product of a Catholic strict Catholic mother. I don't know, but that was very hard that I felt like people were judging me. They were judging my actions. And then after he passed away, I wasn't grieving the way that people wanted,
Hmm.
like I wasn't sad enough. I wasn't, I was going out or it was this constant like, and I'm sure I felt it more than it actually was because I was already feeling like, well, how do people feel I should be acting instead of how I actually felt? Because I wanted people to know I was sad, and I would be very sad if someone thought I didn't care. So, those kind of expectations that people put on you, you put on yourself. And it is very, damaging going back to that. It really damages how you see yourself. And, there's a lot of, baggage that you can build from that because then you feel disingenuous and fake in your own life. And there's a lot of that, that goes with being somebody who cares a lot. And I don't suggest that, I know there's a lot of talk right now and social media spaces, just let it be and you be you and don't worry about what other people think. And I think that's a great thing in theory, but for somebody
Hard to
who
execute.
can't do that or doesn't want to. Maybe I don't want to be okay with everybody hating me. Maybe I don't want to, I don't think that we should all have this magic switch that just is like, well, you do you, I'm going to do me. I don't know that that's very productive either. So I don't know what the answer is, but,
It's somewhere in between.
it
Because
is, it is.
like you said earlier, it says more about them than it does you, right? So, and
Right,
the truth of the matter is that you cannot, no matter what you do, make every single person happy. And
right.
the people who are in tune and in touch with themselves and people are going to understand that everybody grieves in a different way. And some people need to isolate in order to grieve and process. Some people need to go out and experience life because, if everything's just dead and dull and gray in your life, you need to balance that out with maybe going out a little bit so that you can see, okay, there is life in things. There is still life to be had and to be led. And so, for one, being gentle with everybody and their specific grieving process. And for two, you don't know how much they've already processed and grieved before you actually get to the actual event.
Yeah,
I have that problem myself is that by the time, so far, for the most part, everyone I've lost, we kind of knew it was coming eventually at some point. And so I had already processed it all and grieved and came to acceptance by the time we got to the funeral or whatever. And then people will straight attack you for not acting sad enough. And
yeah.
they're like, oh, you didn't love him at all.
Uh-huh.
What? Excuse me?
You're moving on too quickly. You're going
Uh-huh.
out so much. Like, oh, look at you. I'm glad you're happy. Well, they, some people just want you to sit in sadness, and you can only sit in sadness for so long. And they didn't see, I know you mentioned it a while back, behind what went on behind closed doors, you
Hmm.
know? Um, there's there's only so long that you can grieve something or be sad about something before you
Get
accept
sick.
it. Yeah, or you accept it and you're like, it is what it is. I'm sad, but I can't sit in it, and I'm going to make something positive come from it, or I'm going to move forward. But I think sometimes people aren't prepared for you to move forward. It's like,
Hmm.
well, we're not ready yet, so you can't go. And
Hmm.
and it's usually the people that aren't there. They're the ones that are like, we're fighting this, or that they
Hmm.
haven't been watching it for 16 months or however long that is. Um, so.
Yeah, one of my things was w- I like to celebrate life and what that person stood for and what they believed in and what they thought. So I tend to move on quicker because I'm like, well, they can't live their life like that anymore. So I'm going to live that life for them. I'm going to go out there and make the best of everything I can because that's what they would have wanted. And I'm going to help as many people as I can because that's what they would have done. And I'm
Mhm.
going to try to reach out and stay connected to this person and that person because that's what they would have wanted me to do. And yeah, some people, you know, the loss chunk that I spoke about happened in 2021. There are people in the family now that have still not gotten over, they've still not processed that grief. They're still just can't drag themselves out of the bed most of the time, depressed. And you know, on our point to helping those who are grieving, some people don't want to be helped. They want to seep in their sadness. They want to crawl into bed and never return. And yes, it hurts that badly. But also, you can only do that for so long before it's literally starts making you sick.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I agree.
they have to be willing to accept the help.
Yeah.
They have to want to move on before they can move on. And some people just don't want to. And yeah, I don't think it's conscious. I don't think they're doing this, but in a way, it's an easy out to just crawl in bed and be like, nope, I can't do that because I'm grieving. I can't do that because their death destroyed me that much. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't move on with my life at all because I just loved them so much that I am just stuck right here. And right here is where I will die also.
Yeah. And you don't understand, obviously, if you're moving, if you're moving on that quickly, then you didn't love them the way I did. And I hate, I don't know that anyone really, like you said, consciously does, but I did get that feeling that made me compare my feelings and my grief and, how I was feeling, and made me think, well, are they right? Because I seem to be pretty okay at this moment. And, but I also did know that the last thing that Colin would have ever wanted for anyone he loved was for them to sit in grief that he was gone. They wanted us to remember him in life and how happy he was and carry that on,
Mhm.
not his illness, like the minute he was gone, we all tried to put that illness away and remember the person he was before that. And in order to do that, you do have to move on and remember the person that they were. And that is very painful, but he would have never wanted us to sit around in sadness. He certainly, never wanted me to sit around in sadness. So I felt like I was honoring him the way that I knew, versus how someone else feels they were honoring him. I don't believe either one of them is right, but for some reason, I kind of felt like I was doing it wrong,
Mhm.
which is not a fun feeling.
Sure.
So,
Especially when you're already dealing with so much already, other people's opinion. And isn't it funny how those that have the most opinions about how you should be grieving are the ones that oftentimes were not part of any of the process at all, and
yeah.
suddenly they're entitled to give you their opinion on how you should be doing things now.
Yeah. Well, and it was the people that never came to visit him that were
Mhm.
like, I can't believe he's gone. And I was like, well, of course you can't, because you never said goodbye. You
Mhm.
never sat in it. You never like gave yourself the time to recognize that he was going. You just pretended he wasn't, and now you're grieving, rightly so, because you didn't take the time to do it while he was actually going, you know? So and part of me felt bad for them because I think they thought time was endless and it wasn't, and they never got to say what they wanted to say. So, you know,
That's the thing. We do think time is endless, don't we? And it's not even a conscious thought. It's not a
no,
conscious belief. It's just
yeah,
avoidance. Again.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, it's much easier to think like, oh, I mean, anything we don't want to do in life, it's much easier to say, I'll do that tomorrow. Like, and just to like kick the can feels really good. Like, well, I don't want to do laundry today. It'll still be there tomorrow. I'll deal with it.
Hmm.
Some things won't be there tomorrow.
Exactly. N it's never promised. And we've been talking a lot about sickness and it being long and drawn out, but it can be absolutely very sudden at
Yeah,
any point in life for any single one of us. Healthy and happy 1 minute and in a car accident and dead within an hour happens very
yeah.
fast. Um, we all know, I know entirely too many people who uh, have died before they reached adulthood. And, so this is springtime is when we have most of our birthdays. And so it was somebody's birthday the other day, and I was talking to them on the phone. They're like, oh, it's just another day. And I was like, I need you to stop that right now. Um, Birthdays are a celebration that you survived a whole nother year. Okay? Because let me tell you what, it is dangerous out there, and you never know when it's going to be your last birthday. So, I think we look at birthdays wrong. They're like, oh, it's a celebration of life. It's a celebration that you survived another year. Period and
Yeah,
point blank. If we can shift the way we think about things, because so many people are like, oh, it's just another day. No, man, no, because so many people this year had their last birthday and didn't know it was their last.
yeah. And my dad passed away suddenly. He had a heart attack and like he was just gone. And I often wonder, there's such a difference in grieving that loss versus the long drawn out one.
I
And
agree.
they both suck in
Yes.
very different ways. I never got to say everything. I never got to take the time to just have lunch with him,
Yeah.
to have that final meeting. But then with Colin, I had too much time to
Mm.
sit in it and think about it and wallow over it and feel sad. So, I always say there's no good way to die unless
There-
you are the person that is dying, in which case, take me in my sleep. I'm knocking
Yes,
on wood.
please.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes,
That's what
yes,
we all hope
yes.
for, right? Let me just be a regular Tuesday and everything's fine. And I'll just go to sleep, my beautiful nightly routine like I do every night, crawl
Yeah.
into bed and never knew anything happened.
Yep. Kiss your kids goodnight, and that's the end. And yeah, everything
Yeah.
is in a nice little package. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely love everybody all the time because you never know.
No, you don't. That is for sure.
All right, well, I guess I'll let us wrap this up. Tell
Okay.
everybody where to find you.
Well, my book just actually came out on audio, which was pretty exciting. My childhood best friend did her name is Terry Schnabel, and she did the audio version of it. So it can be found on Amazon. It's called Notes from a Blackberry. My charity is the Colin James Barth Outreach, and it's at CJB or cjboutreach.org. You can go on there and see what we're doing. Right now it's local, but we're hoping to go a little bit more national. And my daughter's art, which is really, really cool and unique, Tatum, her website is Hope 4, like the number TAYT. And the 25% of all the proceeds from her art goes to fund the charity. So it's kind of a round robin thing. And my next book will be out hopefully in a couple months. So
Awesome. Well, thank you
yeah,
for talking about all of these things because they really need to be talked about more so that we can maybe shift the culture a little bit. Well, just a fragment at a time. We're not looking to make whatever. It would make a lot. of things easier for people who, again, we're all inevitably going to face loss at some point. And you're right, sometimes it's sudden and sometimes it's long and drawn out, and both suck. They suck in different ways because I've experienced both, and the shock, it's like a gut shot. It's like someone literally shooting you with a shotgun in the chest, in the stomach, and to lose someone suddenly. But also, it is so painful to watch somebody slowly, piece by piece, day by day, change and lose pieces of themselves and become unrecognizable to the person that you loved.
Yeah, yeah, they're both horrible in their own way. But there's some beauty in, when you do lose someone, you recognize all the people that are still here. Every time I hear I lost somebody, it makes me hug the people that are still here a little tighter. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think it's all in what you take out of it. It's never a good situation, but it has to happen. And I think what you take away from it. And thank you for doing this, because I think, even if we can't shift the culture, if one person out there is dealing with all of this and hears
Mhm.
it, then you're making a bigger difference than worrying about the culture. Because I think,
Exactly.
yeah, being in illness and grief and not knowing where to turn and not having anyone to talk to is just it kind of robs your joy. So thank you
Yeah,
for doing this.
thank you. And I feel like this is more for people who know people who are experiencing grief rather than experiencing the grief yourself because we can't tell you how to cope. You can only figure out how best to cope for you and, do what you need to do as long as and that's what the person who went crazy and like got arrested a few times and we're
Yeah.
like, look, we sat them down and we told them, they're like, do what you need to do, don't hurt anyone, and don't cost us a ton of money.
Right.
That was our only
Just don't
two.
affect it. Yeah. Do you, but don't you don't seriously affect anyone else in doing it.
Yeah, guess
Or
what they did?
yourself. Yeah.
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 Um,
Unintended consequences.
ugh, I I guess yeah. But another point is mindset shifts of looking at things like um grief is just love enduring. So
Mhm.
the more it hurts, that's the magnitude of the love that existed between you two. And you get to carry that on. They get to live on in your memories and your dreams and your sharing of the stories of their life with other people. So,
Yeah, that's what the charity is for. I promised Colin on his last days that his death would not be for naught. So, we're trying our best to make something good come out of it.
yeah, well, I think you're doing a great job. And
Oh,
we'll
thank
make
you.
sure that everything's linked below so that people can connect with you and follow your story, y'all's stories. Super
Thank you.
exciting. Love to see how
Yeah,
it unfolds moving forward. And if you would ever like to come on and do another episode, I'd be happy to have you.
great. I would love to.
All right. It's
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure.
Thank you.